I saw you first.
Yeah, and I did have the pleasure of dinner, but I'll start this anyway because I hope it'll add to the discussion. I thought it was in some ways quite true to say that the sociological surveys are difficult to interpret, yet on the other hand we have a large number of them and they are fairly consistent. That is, almost all sociological surveys show the Kyiv Patriarchate before this time coming out with somewhere between 35 to 40 some percentage of all the Orthodox, the Moscow Patriarchate 15 to 18, and then 30 some percent saying I'm just Orthodox. But clearly those who have chosen a affiliation, the Kyiv Patriarchate before this was already twice as numerous as the Moscow Patriarchate. That doesn't tell us about practicing Orthodox, it tells us about the general population. But I thought that should be added to this discussion because then it also then tells us a bit of where the government's going and where it stands. And then in the same way, the number, this will not be too long a comment, but I've been trying to wrestle with success or failure with the number of parishes. So we're up to about 430 now who have gone. But of course, where they went seems very important. The Kyiv Patriarchate starts off with the great advantage of having 1,000-something parishes in Galicia, of well-organized, practicing parishes, who are very, very different from the parishes of Luhansk, and now has moved into Western Ukraine. So in some ways, you can argue the territories the Kyiv, the new church has gone into are the more religious territories of Ukraine. And then the third, and not to go too long, and this is the question part of this in a way, what was left out of this, to my mind, was that these were not just three different churches, two of which are, or as you were calling them, uncanonical, but they also were very different interpretations of orthodoxy and religious traditions. That is, the Ukrainian Autocephalous Orthodox Church comes from the Ukrainian Reform movement of the early 20th century. It has a very different vision of what the church should be, and above all, the role of the laity should be, than the Moscow Patriarchate or the Kyiv Patriarchate. And I wonder if you would expand on that within the general Orthodox context as well, because in some ways, the battles that are going on over churches are restoring the reform movement of the early 20th century. So often the YouTubes I see are a priest trying to stop his congregation from going over, and the congregation deciding that no, you don't decide, we decide, which is very close to the Church of Limbitsky. And I wonder if you'd comment on that, and does it fit in a broader Orthodox context?
I think it became clear, I hope it became clear from what I said, and it became clear from what you said, that it's to a very high degree a question of identity. And it's, we talked about last night, there's no any different whatsoever in questions of dogma, of belief, of faith, and so on, among these churches. So it's about belonging, and if you want to put it in not so friendly terms, you would say about power and authority and so on. But it's about structure, about church structure, not about belief. And also, I want to mention what I told you last night. We must be aware that I presented one part or one perspective of the problem. You have millions of people in Ukraine who go to church because they want to go to church. They have a spiritual need to go to pray, to go to church, to receive communion, and they feel well, or not so well, mostly well, I hope, in their parish, in the church where they go, and so on, which is a very important role of church, which I did not tackle at all, because I spoke about the authority, bishop, church politics, and this kind of questions. Now, coming to your comments and questions, I'm still skeptical. I mean, I know the surveys you mentioned, but about the number of believers. And I also would say most probably, there is a higher degree of people who declare themselves as belonging to the Kievan Patriarchate, or was than to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. But I said it makes already a significant difference. It's not 1 or 2%, much more. You know probably the Razumkov survey, which was made when you have the churches in a different order, and how you call it. When you say the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine or the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, whether you ask for the first hierarchy, you get different answers. So it is, I understand the number of parishes, and I made the point, the people who turn out in a parish, it makes a difference whether you have on one Sunday 1,000 or 10 persons. Both is in the statistics one person, but I'm not so sure whether we can really speak, and plus the topic you mentioned, what does it mean for, because we speak about identity, and it's about belonging, but what does it mean for a church practice, for turning out on Sundays and not only once a year and so on. I mean, it's very similar, by the way, for what we have, for example, in Germany. We have the system of church taxes, and from people who pay church tax, now the newest statistics is that among Catholics, maybe depends which diocese, but let's say on average maybe 12% turn out on an average Sunday. I'm not speaking about Easter and Christmas and so on. And Protestants even less. But you will find people, when you ask people on the streets, I'm Catholic, meaning I was baptized and I pay church tax, but I don't go to church, even not for Christmas, and the Pope is a nice man, but and so on. Eh? So you get, then you have to ask, what does it mean to be Catholic? It's a question of identity, and that is somehow structurally similar to what we find here. Second point, I completely agree. One should make these, but that was not my topic. These statistics, this belonging statistic, the parish statistic, to regions, and it would be very interesting to see how diverse Ukraine is. It is not valid for all over the country. The western part of the country, I mean, the very east, Crimea, Kyiv, and the western part, and I will mention Transcarpathia. So when you have, it's 5 of many more regions one could name, which are completely different, and it would be a more, how do you say, a more finer, so to say, picture of the whole situation if you did it to regions, but that was not what I could do. And also that it's also valid for the different church cultures. No, I know, of course, and I agree.
And I would also have language of liturgy, which is also argued in many of these issues.
But it's also not completely convincing, because the Ukrainian Orthodox Church also uses in a lot permits Ukrainian as a language, which has some absurd consequences, as we mentioned today. But what I want to say is, when we say it's about identity, to a high degree, not exclusively, but to a high degree about identity, then I confess and I see that this tradition of lay participation and like lay people taking the things in their own hands and acting by themselves and so on, is also, or can also be, a part of the identity. But it can also be a part of the identity to belong to a church which is not Greek Catholic, for example, or which is not Russian and not connected with Moscow, and so on. So yes, there is a share, so to say, of this part of these different traditions. But it is also, I would say, it is also about the tense and difficult and complex situation. You must think it is these churches, it is political influence. We are speaking about a situation of war. No, it's not here in Canada or in Germany where we are sitting, and so on. All this together forms this very complex situation in which we are. Yeah.
Okay, firstly, I'm extremely impressed with the degree of knowledge of the gentleman behind me. I have to say that. Okay, now firstly, of course, with respect to the other two churches, you will agree that it's too early to say that they will unite into one church. I think from your comments, there would be a general agreement. It's too early to say. And correct?
Yeah.
And the other thing too, which I'm very interested in, when I'm reading about this in the New York Times, I was so surprised that the Ukrainian church used to be autocephalous, or at least independent, whatever you call it, and then they lost it. I'd like you to explain, perhaps over 3 or 4 minutes, exactly how it happened that they lost it.
Yeah.
So it's too early to say whether there'll be one church, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with the first point. It is too early to say. So to say, we are speaking of events which are 6 and 8 and 10 weeks ago, and we still have to wait. And I guess, but that's just my guess, that if there would be a common and I think that is what Constantinople expected. A common, we all join this church. There would be already something visible. There would be already a movement or a dynamic which is not here, which I cannot see. So that means probably, I guess, it means that we will have for a longer time to come 2 churches in Ukraine of approximately the same size, maybe one a little larger, the other as in parishes or in faithful, and both of them being canonical, one with via Constantinople, so to say, the other via Moscow. And then we have this stuck and this dead-end street situation in Orthodoxy. And as I mentioned, it will be, in my opinion, if it is like, as I said, it will be of crucial importance what the other Orthodox churches do. If they gather around Constantinople, a couple of them, and Moscow, the others, then we will have a schism as in 1517 with the Protestants or as in 1054. If they keep, which as it looks until today, if they manage to keep them together by having communion with both, and interestingly enough, that is something we had frequently in church history, that bishops were in communion with 2 bishops who were not in communion towards each other, and that is a kind of means to keep the church together. You said autocephalous church in Ukraine. I'm not sure about.
I don't know. Right, they were independent over 400 years ago. Then the independence was lost. Whether it's called autocephalous or something else, I had no idea.
Well, we had. I mean, maybe you're.
Lost their independence.
Yeah.
What exactly happened?
Well.
How did they become independent in the first place?
I mean, we are speaking. If you speak about the Ukrainian autocephalous Orthodox Church, this was a church which was with the high engagement of lay people and of clerics also, founded immediately after the Russian Revolution when there was a movement
we're talking about 400 years ago when they lost their independence.
Sir, I'll invite you to speak with Professor Maguchi after, because he's literally written a book on Ukrainian history. So these things are available, and Professor Sisters as well. So I'd just like to give some others the opportunity.
400 years ago, if you are alluding to the switch, so to say, of the Kyiv metropolitan from the jurisdiction of Constantinople to Moscow, that was as a consequence of political circumstances of Moscow becoming the political authority, the political power in Kyiv, and there was an agreement made between. But before that, I would, one actually, but you can correct me, one could not speak about autocephaly of Kyiv, but it was a switch from the one church to the other.
Constantinople.
But it was a part of Constantinople before that, yeah. Please, Father.
A quick comment and then a question regarding the name issue. When the Albanian Orthodox Church was resurrected after the fall of communism, they consciously took on the name the Orthodox Church in Albania, and this has an ecclesiological, meaning because we are in this particular territory, similar to what you alluded to with Cyprus in the 4th century. Now, I'm personally disappointed that they're using this Orthodox Church of Ukraine, because I think in Ukraine would be better, but that's, as they say, Ukrainian people be did. It's just after all. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church is where you really get into quagmire. So I'm very unhappy about that. But now we're going to have the law coming in to say that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church MP now has to be called the Russian Orthodox
Somehow, it must not have Ukrainian in its name. That's the point.
First of all, your opinion, when that happens, is that actually going to change anything? Or is the Russian exarchate or the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, whatever it is, going to abide by that law? And what particular things might that mean in regards to, creating more tension?
After the last 6 months or the last year, I'm very cautious with prophecies, no? Because I failed so frequently. But
make a prophecy. We can bring you back next year.
every year. What happened the last
the annual Bremer lecture.
It seems. First of all, I must say I'm skeptical about the law. I'm not sure whether it's a good idea to have the state determine how a church is called. And I was fighting for 30, and I still am fighting for 30 years in all my lectures I have in Germany, that one should not say it uniates because they do not want to be uniates. No? So they have the right to be the Greek Catholic, Ukrainian Catholic Church or Greek Catholic Church of whatever. And in the same sense, then if a church has its name, and they did not invent it now, but I don't like it, and it is so clear, the law is so clearly made against that very church because it is not a church which has headquarters in a country declared by the Ukrainian parliament as aggressor state. I mean, there's only one aggressor state for Ukraine. So I'm not sure what happens. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church goes the way via the court. So they try to go via the constitutional court, as far as I know. But they try to, and I know that there's also a debate in European Union circles about that is something which we would not regard as a good law, and because Europe can or tries to exercise pressure politically. So maybe they will change that law and will not. I'm not sure. I mean, as far as I see, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is not willing to change its name, and you could see in the new church, which is trying now to claim that name for itself with the bracket edition. I abstain from prophecies, but that is so. I don't know what will happen, but that is what I can say. Then first the gentleman, and then you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just wondering, in the diaspora, has the Orthodox Church of America made any movement because they were aligned with the Russian Orthodox Church?
I have read a statement a couple of weeks ago which was very critical to the Constantinople actions. That is because there is a link. There is it has the Orthodox Church in America got its autocephaly from Moscow, which was not acknowledged by Constantinople in 1970. So there is I mean, I must confess, I know better the situation in the United States than in this country, but in the United States, it's the Greeks. There's the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, which is has much more faithful and believers, and the Orthodox Church in America consists mostly traditionally of like Russian people of Russian descent and of converts, and therefore they have this kind of close connection to the Russian Orthodox Church, and that is visible in that statement. But there's no other Orthodox Church has made a final statement of we accept or we condemn. No? I mean, the Serbs were very, very close to it and so on, but there is no official statement of any other Orthodox Church.
I have two questions. First, a former professor at this college, when he addressed the question of autocephaly and claiming autocephaly, argued that the way to go about it would be to claim autocephaly and act as if one was autocephalous, and then eventually it would have to be accepted as a fact. In that context, this is my first question. In that context, I find the actions of the Ukrainian government to be very surprising. It seems that, even from your lecture, that they played the leading role in making this arrangement. I'd like you to comment on that. My second question also deals with the Orthodox Church of America. I'm aware that in the early days of Ukrainian settlement in North America, and particularly in Canada, that there was a presence of the Russian Orthodox Church. They were based, I believe, in San Francisco or thereabouts. Yeah. It was their intention, the Russian Orthodox Church, that every Orthodox congregation would have an allegiance to the Russian Orthodox Church, that they would be primary. In this context, I found the comments that were included in the Tomos with respect to the primacy of Constantinople to be very interesting, because it seems to be now we have a rivalry between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Greek Orthodox Church of Constantinople with respect to the souls of the Orthodox.
Yeah, there are persons in this room which could much better answer the second question, but I will try something, and you can, Frank, and you can correct me. First, yes, it is true, and historically we have a lot of cases when churches were claiming autocephaly, like in Romania or in Bulgaria, and which was not accepted by the ecumenical patriarchate, but only after sometimes decades. So claim autocephaly, wait 50 years, and you will be autocephalous. That's
Greece itself.
And well, Greece is a little bit. There was a lot of political pressure because the Brits wanted to have as an independent state. So each case, as always in life, it's hard to compare. Each case is special, but there is a point for that. One, I'm just this morning I was writing an article about autocephaly. I'm working on an article, and I just wrote about this idea, and I came somehow. It seems to me one could at least critically ask whether it's a good way, so to say, to not to stick to rules and to wait that it will be. Maybe it is in fact something which will work, but one could also be skeptical. But one point I mentioned, for example, the church in what is now called Northern Macedonia, which claimed, with political help of then Yugoslav government, autocephaly in 1967. No other church ever accepted it. The Greek church is not because of the Macedonian name issue, and the Serbian church because they said it's Serbian church. After the end of Yugoslavia and the independence of what is now called Northern Macedonia, the local government very, very much supported that church, and they forbid Serbian clerics and bishops to enter the country. So in order to protect that church, they have a relatively high degree on religious freedom, but not for orthodoxy, which is not Macedonian orthodoxy. But here we have the case, it's the only Orthodox church in the country, I admit with the help of the government, and it's working. People come and they have a hierarchy, and they have priests, they train priests, and so on. Little different is the case. So that would be an argument for saying, okay, now it seems that now the Greek Macedonian problem is settled. So give him 10, 20 years, and then also the church question will be settled. The different, which seems to me is a huge difference, is in the fact that in Ukraine we have two competing churches on the same territory, which is according to the idea of orthodoxy in predominantly Orthodox countries, not working. It's not a problem. It is also a problem, but not so much here or in Europe, in Western Europe, in Germany. But it is a problem. I mean, if you have these two churches, who is the Orthodox bishop of Odessa? Now you have two gentlemen who both say it's me, and it is one should not have, according to Catholic and Orthodox ecclesiology, two bishops for one place. And we have I'm sorry, being a little bit long, but we have the problem, for example, we have 4 or 5 bishops in Germany, Orthodox bishops, who are in communion with each other and who have the title of Frankfurt, Berlin, or something, and all Germany. One is Russian, one is Serbian, one is Romanian, one is Bulgarian, and so on. And Greek, of course. They know about that. And they have a bishops' conference, they cooperate, there's no competition, and it works in the diaspora. And they understand it's a problem, but it's for now. In the United States, I saw they try to have not 2 bishops for the same name of a city. So they are not 2 Orthodox bishops of Chicago or of Boston, but then you have a bishop of Manhattan and a bishop of the Bronx and a bishop of Brooklyn, because these people are all sitting in New York City. No? But it's at least formally an attempt to make a differentiation. So there is a huge theological, in addition to all this political, theological problem behind. The government's actions, that's what you asked. Well, one point is that it is, as I said, it somehow, if you look at it clearly or simply rationally, it paid off, as I said. No? It worked, so to say, and there is a very high. I spoke to the secretary of a bishop in a province town of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and he said me, for example, I asked him, what did your bishop do with the invitation to the council 15th of December, because all bishops got, also the ones from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And he said to me, he even didn't want to see the man who brought the invitation. He didn't. He refused to see him. And I asked, was it someone from Constantinople who? And he said, no, it was the oblast administration. So someone from the political brought the state organized that church, you can say. And we also agreed and said, after, 27th, 29th of March, after the elections in Ukraine, there will be much less pressure, political pressure in this issue. Of course, it depends who will win the elections, but it will change the situation. And it is somehow, I do not understand why the ecumenical patriarchate, after 28 or 29 years, choose now half a year before the elections for its actions. They could have waited one more year or half a year, and then it would be somehow a different situation. But that's history, and that's what happened. Your second questions, please help me. The Russian Orthodox Church, I noted, but
the OCA.
Sorry, it's not. I don't like to do this, but I'm trying to exercise. I think if Father Peter were here, moderator's privilege. We only have 5 minutes left, and I know there are a few people waiting. So
okay, I will be very, very brief. The OCA and yes, I remember now. Yeah, well, the first presence of Orthodoxy in this country was from Russia via Siberia, Alaska, and on the left is west, on the west coast down until San Francisco, as you said, and only later came the immigration in the 19th century from Europe to the East Coast. And for relatively long time, there was these were small groups or a bishop and so on, but there was not the idea of one Orthodox Church in one country. And you are right, I agree that we have a kind of turned around situation now between the claims of both churches from both sides.
Mr. Hall, I'm not a historian. I'm just
I also am not a historian.
plain layperson. I'm curious why, when you put the names of the Orthodox churches, why you said the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, like to me. Why didn't you put Moscow MP?
Because
because the other one, to me, that's really disinformation.
Yeah.
That's the way Putin would like it.
Yeah, but I simply took the names how the churches call themselves. It is the Moscow Patriarchate is an addition. I also do sometimes, and many people, scholars do, in order to make clear which we speak about. But the own name of the Patriarchate of Kyiv, as you saw from the website, is Patriarchate of Kyiv.
Yeah. But as you said during your thought, context is very important.
Yeah.
To any Ukrainian that I know, their identity, their religious identity is intertwined with their Ukrainianism.
Yeah.
That goes together, whether it's Orthodox, whether it's Catholic, whether it's in Canada, in the States, or in Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's all. Maybe that's why the statistics in Ukraine are so different. That you don't belonging to a church is like being Ukrainian. Now, the other, I'm curious. To me, you've made the assumption that people, the average Ukrainian in the village, knows the difference between the patriarchies and who's controlling it and knows about that.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yes, they don't. I agree. First of all, just for the first point, just to very shortly, I said here, Ukrainian Orthodox Church very clearly said it is a part of the Russian Orthodox Church within the Russian Orthodox Church and so on. So I know it and I said it, but I simply took the official name. For the other, I did not say that everybody knows all these differences, but I said the other way around. I said that many people are even not aware how. They go to, you go to in the village, it's clear, you go to the village church, and in cities you go where you like the priest, or where they have a nice choir and they sing well, or which is next to you, and so on, where your neighbor goes, or by whatever reasons you go to a certain church. Some people make a very conscious choice and say, I do not want to pray for that metropolitan, but for the other one.
No, but then how can you have surveys that do not specifically tell them what it is they want to know? I mean, if you just say what church they belong to the Orthodox Church,
yeah.
So they have no idea which part.
That's what I say.
If you tell them it's Russian, it's controlled from Moscow. Oh no, they don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That is the background of that law I mentioned. That's why they want to have the name changed into Russian Church. But you must also see that many people in that church, in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is a part of the Russian Orthodox Church, I personally know a lot of people who are very conscious Ukrainians and who speak Ukrainian, who think Ukrainian, who fight. I know a archimandrite, a high monk, who in his parish collects cloth and food for the Ukrainian army.
And they also resent the priest telling them anything, how to vote, or anything pro-Putin.
Yeah. No, they are not for pro-Putin, absolutely not. Yeah. Okay, so it's
great time for, I think, one more question, or perhaps two if the first is quite short.
It's a problem of the answer, not of the question.
I saw on the website the letter from Stalin which authorized the resurrection of the Russian Orthodox Church. And to me it sounded as if it was a civil authority bringing into existence a church, and that's what leads me to doubt the canonicity. Because how can a civil authority establish a church?
Yeah. You mean the letter or the decision during and immediately after the Second World War of Stalin?
During the war.
Yeah. Okay. See, we must understand in Stalinism in the years in the 30s and before the Second World, it was a situation of complete persecution and lack of freedom, completely lack of freedom. And the church, the state in the end could do and did do what it wanted to do. So the church could not act freely. You had in Russia, in the Russian Empire, in 1914, you had 106 bishops, acting bishops. In 1941, at the start when the Second World War started, you had 4 who could act as bishops in the dioceses. Everybody else was dead, in a camp, or prevented from acting. So the church was at the edge of being destroyed completely. Stalin understood after the beginning of the war that he needed the support for the war of the church, and it was a kind of, I wouldn't even say agreement. He allowed the church because he needed it, and he, instead of persecuting it as it was before, bloodily, it was a very strong control of the church. The church could not act freely, but it could act in a very limited degree. The canonicity I would not doubt in this case because it was the same church. That persecuted church, the last ember, so to say, again became a kind of small fire, and then eventually. So I would not say it was a creation by Stalin, but he simply a little bit. He loosed the ties which the church was bound.
Wow, just one point on state pressure. The most effective state pressure has come from a Catholic state, Poland, coming from already the 14th century and down to 1924. I think it's one of those most interesting examples that has to be brought in, that of course it was a very effective political action of the Polish state that got Constantinople to issue the Tomos that pushed forward, and one that's left out, as we were always discussing Orthodox societies and states, and yet it really, in the Middle Ages, it was a Catholic state that insisted on separate metropolitanates, and then Poland went in full guns in the early 20s to get themselves.
If we are honest, yes, I agree. If we are honest, we have that in many parts of the world and in many churches. No? We always think somehow it's Orthodoxy and Catholic Church, but Protestant is not. But if you look at more closely, you will find in Catholic history a lot everywhere in South America and everywhere a lot of very strong influence, and also But I want to say we have in principle in history of Christianity, we always find these attempts by states to prohibit the church, to destroy it, or to make use of it for their own purposes. Thank you.